but
He never had a big wedding.
Well, the machine's
She
on now, so
did.
just be careful what you say.
What'd you say?
So the machine's on now, so be careful what you say. All right. So we're gradually moving ourselves forward in history. First week we looked at the Torah, and the second week we looked at the later writings, and then last week we looked at the apocryphal writing. We looked at the books that are not part of the Torah, but were developed right around the end of the Second Temple period. So remember we read the story about Tobit and the fish and the lungs and that stuff, and then we also looked at Josephus and Philo, whatever. So today we're moving forward. Today we're going to look at how families lived in a period from approximately the time of the destruction, that's stuff from last week, from the time of the destruction of the Second Temple until the codification of the Talmud. So the Talmud was codified around the years 500, 550, something like that. So it's about a 500-year period. So first of all, it's a long period. Things can change over 500 years. Second of all, we're looking at family life in Israel, and we're also looking at family life in Babylon. So it could be different in the two places, and we'll see that eventually as we go along. Third of all, we're looking at families as they're described by the rabbis who wrote the books. All right? So we are looking at family life from a subset of the Jews who lived during that time. So we're looking at the rabbinic class and how they thought mothers and children and parents should behave and how they thought everybody else should behave. But did they all behave that way? Probably not. So we're looking at families as are described by the rabbis who had their own agenda. There were plenty of other classes at that time, but we don't know exactly what they did because they didn't write anything. But just keep that in mind, because when we're reading stuff from the Mishnah, reading stuff from the Gemara, we're really reading it through the lens of the rabbis who had their own particular cultural background and cultural expectations. We're going to look at 3 different kinds of literature. We're going to look a little bit at some things in the Mishnah. The Mishnah was codified around 200 CE, or about 130 years or so after the temple was destroyed. And that was the initial attempt to write down Jewish laws. Things are getting kind of hairy because Jews were spreading all over the place and Christianity was starting to spread. And so they realized we ought to put things down. So that's the Mishnah. Then, after the Mishnah was written, they realized they didn't write down everything they needed to write down. And they kept elaborating on the laws and making more details and trying to figure things out. So they wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. And the commentary on the Mishnah was the Gemara. And the Mishnah plus the Gemara is the Talmud. And there were 2 Talmuds. There was a Jerusalem Talmud and a Babylonian Talmud. Each a little bit different. And then the third thing we're going to look at, so it's Mishnah and Gemara Talmud. And the third thing we're going to look at is Midrash. So we're going to look specifically at what's known as Midrash Agadah, or story Midrash. And those are stories that, for the most part, elaborate on stories in the Bible. So the rabbis would put these stories together to try to explain things in the Bible, or add elements onto the stories of the Bible that were missing, or explain contradictions or stuff like that. A lot of the stuff is in story form, some of it is in explanation form, and so but those are the 3 things we're going to look at. Any questions about any of that?
Nope.
We're good?
You need a pen?
Pardon?
You need a pen?
Not yet, but I
I'll
may.
leave it there.
Okay. All right. We're going to start out by looking, like we have before, at some different elements. And then towards the end, I told you last week, what we're going to do towards the end is we're going to look at a conflict that began at this time and continues through today. The conflict is what's more important for the husband to do? Is it more important for the husband to set aside time and study all day, or is it more important for the husband to spend time with his family? What's on a higher plane? Husband learning Torah or husband with family? We could turn that into a secular thing. Is it more important to establish yourself in your job, or is it more important to spend quality time with your family? Or on a religious point of view today, we have a lot of frum people. So they go to day schools or yeshiva, and then they go to a college-age yeshiva, and then when they should be going off into the work world, what do? They go to a kollel. And so a kollel is like an adult yeshiva, and they'll study there for years and years and years and years. And they get married, but they're not earning any kind of living. Finally, they leave, and then it's hard to find it. It's hard to make a living. So that's still going on today.
And then they teach in a yeshiva.
Yeah, if they could find a job teaching in yeshiva. All right.
What do they do?
Pardon?
What do they do?
Well, some of them go into business. Like, I know my experience in Toronto was that when they left Kollel, they would just assume they can open up a business and everything would be really great. So if they had wealthy parents, the parents could either set them up in a business or they could work in the parents' business. That happens sometimes. Toronto was really big on setting people taking jobs in import-export. They would get a warehouse, and they would go to China and bring a bunch of stuff back from China and then try to sell it in Canada. And some would do really well and some wouldn't do quite so well. But you had to have a head for business. Or, like Fran just said, some would go teach.
Right.
And often, in a lot of the frum schools, they don't have any teaching credentials. All you have to do is say that you went to yeshiva and you learned, and that's all you have to
Well,
say.
yeah, a lot of them get smicha from learning and learning and learning. And all they have to do is have another rabbi say, okay, now you're a rabbi too.
But in Toronto and some of the day schools, one where we had a class, there were a lot of teachers there who the kids called Rebbe. Rebbe this and Rebbe this and Rebbe that. But they didn't have any kind of smicha. It's just that their title in the school was Rebbe. So you couldn't really tell whether or not they really...
Rebbe as in teacher as opposed to
Yeah.
Rebbe as in rabbi.
Yeah,
What were you called?
And you really didn't know. Pardon?
What were you called?
No, I was Dr. Parker. No. But I would have a class in these frum schools, but it wasn't my school and they didn't pay my salary. So it was different.
And some actually only study at the kollel part-time and actually get a real job.
All right, so let's start out with a midrash. And this is a midrash that has to do with education. So Fran, do you want to read?
The education of children. Shir HaShirim Rabbah 1-4.
So that means that this is from the midrash on Shir HaShirim, from Song and Songs. It's the first midrash, the fourth section of the first midrash. Okay.
When Israel stood at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, the Holy One, blessed be He, said, "If you want me to give you the Torah, bring me good guarantors that you will keep it." They replied, "Lord of the universe, our ancestors will be our guarantors." God replied, "Your guarantors require guarantors. I have found fault with them."
Okay, so you follow what that's saying?
They're not good enough.
Yeah, the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they made mistakes. I don't really trust them. They're going to be guarantors. You guys are going to keep the Torah. Okay.
They replied, "Our prophets will be our guarantors." Replied God, "I have found fault with them as well." Finally they said, "Our children will be our guarantors." And God replied, "In truth, these are excellent guarantors, and for their sake I will give you the Torah."
Okay.
We teach that today to our children.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a teacher, I know I teach that the children were really the only ones that God trusted to
Right.
pass on.
Right, they didn't have any baggage, right?
Not until they become
Yeah,
adolescents.
not because they don't.
Right, that's why, because you teach young kids, so they still are good.
But we find lots of stories like this talking about the importance of education and passing the information on to the children. This notion of one of the major goals of being a parent is to educate your children goes through lots and lots. I mean, what's Pesach all about? Or what's the Seder all about? The Seder is all about is all passing it on to your children. I mean, you know it already, but it's passing on your children. So a major function of families, as far as the Mishnah and Talmud are concerned, was the education of children, and we continue to do that today.
And also saying, well, you know that I'll do this because my parents did it. Is not necessarily true, but if you know that you've done it because your children now do it, that is a future thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it moves you forward. And unfortunately, I mean, you're in the field, but unfortunately, we have a lot of parents today who don't feel the obligation to pass it on to their kids, in part because it wasn't passed on to them adequately. And so if you don't pass it on, it gets lost. I don't remember who did the study, but there was a study years ago about like Japanese immigrants and I forget what the other, I don't remember the details anymore, but Japanese immigrants, when they would come into the States, they felt obligated to pass Japanese culture. Japanese school and pass Japanese culture on to their kids. There were other immigrants who felt duty-bound to have their kids assimilate into the dominant culture. But if you're born in an outside country and you're trying to pass on the elements of the dominant culture to the next generation, you can't. Or you can't do it well because you don't know the dominant culture. And so what they found is that children of immigrants who felt it was important to pass on their culture to their kids did better in society than the children of parents who felt that they had to, first thing they had to do was get their kids to
So
assimilate.
you can see it even in test scores. You can see it currently in like school. You can see it. I know, like at Detroit Country Day. If you look, like when they started, I know when my kids when they started in the lower school, the field was an even playing field. And then as the kids got older, middle school and high school, the American children couldn't keep up with the children that had, whether it was the Asian children or the Indian children, but just that they had two different puddles.
Right.
You know, they had their cultural connection, and then they had their being in America connection, and we see it, you know, that I know for me, if they're answering to somebody that's greater than them, you know, whether it's, you know, us answering to the Torah or to God, you know, it gives our kids a foundation.
But it's also that if you want your kids to, a culture, whatever culture it is, a culture is a viable means for passing on values, right? And if you don't have a culture to pass on to your kids, you don't have that viable means for passing on the values. How do kids learn values? They learn values partially on the street, or they learn values partially on television, or they learn values in a variety of other places, but they don't learn it well. So that's why passing the culture from generation to generation really says something about what your values are, what your ethics are, what your work ethics are, all those kind of things. So it's proven to be a mistake to move into a new country and say, I'm just going to, you know, give up whatever I was brought up with. And that's what Judaism has said, is that we're going to teach. All right, so a little bit about the education of children. Barbara, you want to go?
Babylonian Talmud, Sukkah 42a.
Okay, so just really quickly. So it's two Talmuds. There's the Babylonian Talmud. The volume is Sukkah. So what's it about? Sukkah. And every page in the Talmud has an A side and a B side. So sometimes you'll see 42a or 42b or 23a. Okay.
When a child learns to speak, his father is required to teach him Torah and to read the Shema with him. To what does teaching him Torah refer? Rabbi Hamnuna said to the verse, Moses commanded us
Torah.
Torah. It's the legacy of the congregation of Jacob.
Okay. So You all know the song Torah, 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 Torah. That's what this
I
is.
know it.
Okay? Torah, Ranu, Moshe. So that's what it says. What's the first thing you teach about Torah? You teach that verse. That where does the Torah come from? The Torah came from God, who gave it to Moses, and the Torah is our legacy. It's our inheritance. It's what we got. So the very first thing you're supposed to get kids to know. And then I left out a piece, and then it says, read the Shema. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to teach them to say Shema Yisrael.
And that's the first thing that we teach our kids. Like I know as a parent, that was the very first thing. The very first, like
Right.
anything with depth. What, going through Hebrew school or going through preschool, that, and the basis was, and you teach your children.
Right. I know that in a lot of families, when my kids were growing up, and now my son does the same thing, is when the kids go to bed at night,
Right.
they say their Shema. May not know what it means, but my little one's been saying Shema for his past 4.5 years.
And that's, it's a life skill,
Right.
and that's really all you can hope for.
I don't even
Yeah.
remember my parents really teaching us anything else, except I remember that every night we would say the Shema, and every morning when we woke up we would say the Shema. But I can't remember, they probably taught us to do other prayers as well. I mean, my mom taught us some things, but yeah, every night that was the first thing that they taught us to do.
Okay, so that's the first big change that we've seen from the last couple of weeks. We're seeing this really strong emphasis on education, and we've heard about education in the past, but now it's almost being institutionalized here. That one of the major obligations of a parent is to teach their children and teach their children Judaism and pass it on, and children are the future of Judaism. Okay, so we've got here 3 different texts, all have to do about what parental obligations are for boys and for girls. So Lisa, do you want to do the first one?
A father is obligated to circumcise his son, redeem him, teach him Torah, take a wife for him, and teach him a trade. Some authorities say to teach him to swim also. What is the reason? His life may depend on it. He who does not teach his son a craft teaches him to be a thief.
Okay. So first thing a father is obligated to do is what? Circumcise. So really, it's the father's job to circumcise his son. Today, most parents wouldn't want to do that and don't know how to do it, and so there's a moil. So the moil is supposed to ask the father permission if he can
And
circumcise.
then you give the knife to the father, and then the
Yeah.
father
Right.
Mhm.
passes it
Yeah,
back.
they specifically, ask them if.
That's right.
And my husband 3 times has said, well, twice he said absolutely not. The third time he says, well, maybe. And I looked at him and he says, no, it's okay, you can do it. Like, don't you go near my son.
Okay, so your first job as a father with your son is to circumcise him. Your second is to redeem him. You know what redeeming him means?
Pidyon
Yes,
ben,
pidyon ben.
but you can only do that once.
Right. So if it's a firstborn son.
Right. So, you can't do that with each of your sons.
Pidyon ben? When the child is firstborn son, 30 days of age,
Yeah.
has to be bought back from the Kohen.
But the women, for my daughter, you do something.
Yeah, you don't have to.
You don't have to. It's a naming usually.
Yeah, if they do something, it's a new custom.
Okay.
Then teach him Torah, which we talked about. Then take a wife for him, and then we just read about that in last week's Torah reading.
That's funny the way that it sounds like instead of get a wife for him, like, okay, I'm going to take this wife in your name. And then he marries her.
That's right. Well, and that's the way it was done, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, no.
the father
But what I'm
marries
saying is, the father, that's what it sounds like.
Okay.
It's like, that's a little bit.
and then teach him a trade. So the father or the obligation of the father for the child is to really get him going and keep him going. And it's interesting here. It's not just Torah, right? It's also teaching him a trade. He has to know how to earn a living. He needs to know how to be self-sufficient as an adult. The other piece is really interesting. Is the piece about teaching him how to swim.
Right.
Right. So what's that saying? Besides it'll save his life.
Life skills.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So you have to teach life skills. You have to teach them how to be able to get by in this world. And we can generalize from swimming to many other things, but you have to be able to teach them to do things. I was just kind of freely associating, but the school that I worked at, somebody told me that a couple of weeks ago there was a little girl who was having challah and she had a seizure at the same time she was having challah, and it got stuck in her throat, and so they had to do CPR on her, and she's fine. That's the same type of thing, right?
So scary.
Yeah, teach. You have to learn certain
Survival
things,
skills.
survival skills.
This is interesting that, this is directly from the Talmud saying that you should teach your son a craft, and yet, like you said, a lot of the Orthodox, they just learn.
Mm-hmm.
And this says, you need to learn
That's right.
have a living and not just be a thief or
Yeah, the
live off others.
Talmud is pretty clear that you need to be able to earn a living. We'll see some text later on where you'll see what happens in a little while. But most of the rabbis worked. Most of the rabbis had trades. They were shoemakers, or they were porters, or they were this. There were some who didn't. And they didn't work mostly because they came from very wealthy families, so they didn't have to. But most of them had to have a job of some kind. All right, so father's obligated to do all these things. What about for the daughter? Does he have any responsibilities for the daughter? You want to read?
Must provide for his daughter clothing.
Right.
Covering, and must also give her a dowry so that people may be anxious to woo her and so proceed to marry her. And to what extent? Up to 1/10 of his wealth.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. And what if you had 10 daughters? Boy, were you in trouble.
Okay, so father must provide for his daughter clothing, so she has to keep her dressed.
Covering?
And covering is also a type of clothing, and
Oh, okay.
then raise money for a dowry. Well, it's not quite. If you have $10, it's not so bad because each time it's 1/10 of what you have left.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's not 10% and 10%, 10%, 10%.
That's good.
It's 10%
What
of what you
happens?
have left.
What happens if there's? I know that. What if there's not a male around, a father? We don't look at it that way.
Yeah, then you got problems, and then you got to try to find a relative who will help to give the dowry.
Yeah.
So if there's not a male around, or the woman doesn't have a source of income, but the dowries were really important. 10% is a huge amount of money. It's a huge amount of money to give. But what doesn't the father have to do for the
Doesn't
girl?
have to educate her.
That's
He just has to
right.
make sure she's wooed for her money.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Kind of sad, 'cause
So
that's
the-
what guys complain about now.
Right.
So
So
that what?
That's what guys complain about now.
No, but what did you say? They have to, the education.
Woo, they don't. There's no education.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about having to educate her. It
Oh.
just says
You're right.
She
Okay.
doesn't even have to be educated
Money.
in the ways
Right.
of keeping a house.
well, no, we're
Although
talking about the
would-
father's obligation.
Oh, okay.
Right.
it doesn't say that.
Right, because the mother would do that.
Okay.
education for the
So the mother would teach her the ways of the house, how to sew and to knit and to crochet and make soup and all those kind of things. But there's no obligation for the son to have the Jewish education.
For
But
the
when
daughter.
you look today, how, as a mother of daughters, how important it was for us to say to our daughters, I know me personally, never depend on a man for anything.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure that you're educated in your own right and you have a skill and you have a trade, and then go forward.
Yeah. Cheryl's father died when he was 40 something, and her mother didn't have a trade, so she got a clerical job where she worked, but it really taught Cheryl
Needed job.
that she needed to have a skill, regardless of whatever her husband was able to do. She always made sure that she was studying towards having having a job.
And that's, a big difference, I think, societal. I think for the most part, when families have sons, they still are doing, what the Talmud said 1,000 years ago. But there's been drastic shift in how we
That's
care
right.
for daughters.
Yeah, especially in the past 50 years or so. Even 100 years ago, the daughters were just expected to marry a good husband and didn't need to have to do much else.
And a good husband didn't mean much. It just meant he provided, not that he was necessarily good to her.
Right. I was going to say that, clearly I can't include everything in here. There are a few exceptions in the Talmud for women who had a good education. So, for instance, there was a Rabbi Meir, who had a wife whose name was Bruria. And there's a number of cases of Bruria in the Talmud where it talks about her getting into halachic discussions with men and besting the men. So she had a good education and she knew what to do and she was a smart lady. Having said that, Rashi says, so Rashi lived in our next time period, but Rashi says that Bruria that somebody had suggested to Rabbi Meir that Bruria wasn't quite as upstanding as he thought she was, and they came up with a bet, and the bet was whether or not she could be seduced. And so they had somebody come by every day to see if they could seduce her, and ultimately she was.
What's that do with her education?
She was seduced, pardon?
What does that do with her education and how brilliant she was?
Okay, well, it comes to that in a second.
Okay.
And then she was seduced, and then after she succumbed, then she killed herself, so she committed suicide. So what is that telling us? That's telling us that it doesn't have anything to do with her education, but Rashi was telling a story that was either he made up or he had heard that was bringing her down a couple of notches. You can't have a woman who can best rabbis, so what do? You come up with a story that puts her down.
Wasn't she a woman that was used for welcoming guests, where she wasn't well groomed and she wasn't, and there was a visitor at the house and the husband spoke poorly to her, and the visitor said something to the effect of, you give me all the best food and you give me all the best wine and you treat your wife so poorly.
Mm-hmm.
You were supposed to have been trained better.
Yeah, I don't know that story, but it may be.
But didn't Rashi's daughters, weren't they educated?
Well, apparently they were educated as well.
Right.
So, but that's kind of stories. We don't know how well they were educated.
Right.
So, and certainly we can't rely on the 3 books that were written about it.
They were really good books. But supposedly they would listen in on
Right.
what was going on.
Nonetheless, there is this story about Bruria.
Did she actually kill herself? Like, do we know that?
There's nothing in the Talmud. There's nothing in the rabbinic literature that confirms that. It's just a story that shows up by Rashi about
to drag her name.
Yeah, to drag her name through the mud 600 years later. So we can't find any independent confirmation of it. I love this next piece, only because it sounds like it could have been written yesterday. Okay, so think about your own daughters, and so it says in the Babylonian Talmud, a daughter is a vain treasure for her father. Through anxiety on her account, he can't sleep at night. When she's a child, he worries she'll be seduced. As an adolescent, that she'll be promiscuous. As an adult, that she won't get married. As a married woman, that she won't have children. And if she grows old, that she will engage in witchcraft. So,
usually we don't think about the last part.
right, yeah. We don't worry about the witchcraft so much anymore. But the other stuff, a father and a mother, what do? They worry about.
Right, they worry about their daughters.
Yeah, they worry about their daughters. They worry about what's going to happen to them, and can they go out at night, should they be walking by themselves, and who they're going to hang out with, and who they're going to be with, and they get married. No. When are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids?
And we worry about our sons too.
Yeah. I was just saying to Cheryl, this evening we were having dinner, so my son-in-law just passed the bar this week.
Oh,
so he got his results, so he just passed the bar.
Yay!
So I said to Cheryl, well, come summer they should be talking about having a family. And Cheryl says, don't even mention it. Don't say a thing.
No, you can't do anything
Your
like
daughter
that.
likes catching babies. I don't know if she wants to have one caught yet, but
So it's some things don't change no matter what, and it's not it's not like you don't worry about the same things for a son. You worry more about your daughter with these things.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
so Mazel Tov.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad that he
Very.
did
yes.
get through that.
Are they here?
No, we're in Silver Spring, Maryland. He has a trade, so
There we
it
go.
says here.
Yeah, finally settled on one.
That's right. He's got a trade. He's good. All right. We talked about discipline last time, and if you remember and the time before that, and a lot of the discipline stuff that we read was spare the rod and spoil the child. So what we're going to look at to see whether or not that has changed at all in the rabbinic and Talmud time. You want to read the first one?
Discipline, Shmot Rabbah.
Okay, so this is a midrash, and I chose this midrash specifically because it deals with some of the Torah reading stuff that we're doing now. So, okay.
Anyone who refrains from chastising his son causes him to fall into evil ways, and thus comes to hate him. This is what we come to find in the case of Ishmael, who behaved wickedly before Abraham his father, but
But he did not
not chastise him, with the result that he fell into evil ways, so that he despised him and cast him forth empty-handed from his house. What did Ishmael do? When he was 15 years old, he commenced to bring idols from the streets, toyed with them, and worshipped them as he had seen others.
Okay, so let me just tell you where this comes from in the text. In the text, Isaac is born, and then it says that Sarah was looking out and saw Yishmael, and it said, saw Yishmael, the Hebrew word was mitzachek. Mitzachek, some people say has sexual connotations to it, but in this case, it's being taken literally that he was mitzachek, he was playing. And what was he playing with?
Himself.
Well, no, that's sexual piece, but here,
Right.
but here it says he was playing with idols.
Where do they get the idols from?
Pardon?
Yeah, where do they get the idols from?
Probably went out in the street and found
No,
some.
where do they? How do they get idols out of Mitzahek?
Oh, no, so mitzachek is playing. So,
Yeah.
so the Midrash says, what did he play with? So he must have been playing, he was a bad man, so he must have been playing with idols. Okay. So he was playing with idols, he was bringing them for idols in the street, toyed with them and worshipped them as he had seen others. And that's what Sarah got so angry about. But what did Abraham do? Abraham did nothing. He did nothing and he got upset about it. So in the end, what did he have to do? He had to send him away. He got angry. So there have to be consequences for your kids. You have to discipline them carefully. You can't just let it go. Because look what happened with Abraham and Ishmael. Okay, keep going.
Because Isaac did not chastise Esau, he became depraved. Esau the wicked committed 5 transgressions. He seduced a betrothed maiden, killed a man, denied resurrection, rejected the fundamental principles of religion, and rejected the birthright. Moreover, he longed for death of his father and sought to slay his brother.
Okay, so because Isaac didn't know Esau very well and didn't discipline him and didn't raise him to be a good Jew, what happened? Esau did all these things. Does the text say any of these things? It says
The birthright.
it says the birthright. It says he
Yeah.
despised the birthright. The other things are all rabbinic, midrashic extrapolation.
Yeah, no, read these ones.
It was really important for the rabbis to turn Esau into a villain, and they took every opportunity in any midrashim or commentaries to make him as bad as possible. Just to give you an example, it says over here, moreover, he longed for the death of his father and sought to slay his brother. After Jacob stole the birthright, there's a verse in the Torah, you'll see it this week, there's a verse in the Torah that says, and Esau said, after the death of my father, I will kill my brother.
Right.
So that interpretation here is he longed for the death of his father.
But another way of interpreting it is that he had respect for
Right.
his father.
Yeah.
Right.
And wouldn't.
Right. And so that's why I'm saying that the text here does everything they can to turn him into, and that he sought to slay his brother. Yeah, he did say, I'll kill my brother, but I mean, think about the vernacular that we still use today, where it says, I'm so angry at you, I could kill you. And we know from a couple weeks later that when they meet, Jacob is worried his brother's going to beat him to a pulp. What does he do? He gives him a hug and a kiss.
And may have either kissed him or bit him.
Well,
depending on who you-
so the rabbis who wanted to make him look really bad
Right,
said that he bit him. But it could be a kiss. But so here we have, it's really important to discipline. It's really important to be strict. Don't let anything go. I mean, we say that today too, right? We say that you got. It doesn't say to beat him, but it says you have to do what you need to do. Okay, but here's a really interesting one. The next one, Barbara.
I like this. A child should be pushed aside with the left hand and drawn closer with the right hand. From the Babylonian Talmud, Sotah 47a.
So what does that mean?
Means there's a push and a pull.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a
That-
balance, you know.
You discipline him with love.
Right, you discipline with love, or you're not afraid to discipline, but you're also not
Right,
afraid to
right.
love. That there has to be balance. The first time we've heard that, we didn't read that in the Torah at all or anything else. The others basically was, if you hug your kid and kiss your kid and you love your kid too much, what's going to happen? You're going to, or if you play with your kids, you're going to ruin them. Here, already there's a bit, there's more of a balance. All right, the next one, where is it from?
Ephesians?
Yeah, what's Ephesians? Yeah,
I don't know. I'm going to learn something tonight.
Ephesians is the New Testament.
No wonder I
So
didn't recognize that one.
I picked two texts here that came from the New Testament. This is Paul's letter to the Ephesians. So there's a number of letters in there that he writes encouraging communities to be good new Christians. The reason why I chose it was because it was the same cultural context that we're dealing with now. Paul was raised as a Jew, so he came from a Jewish cultural background, and so there's not a lot in the Christian Bible about families, but there is a couple of things. You'll see another one later on. Okay, Lisa, you want to read?
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. And fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
Okay. So, what's he saying? The parents are supposed to. Children are supposed to honor their parents, and Paul points out that in the Ten Commandments, this is the first one that has a consequence to it. So there's a consequence saying because it's hard to honor your parents. And so it's saying here, this is what you have to do, and you're going to get a reward for it. But then it goes the other side, and it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. So teach them what they need to do, teach them their Judaism, teach them to understand God, but don't get them angry.
Well, obviously you have to get rid of them before they hit adolescence, because just saying good morning can make them angry.
I saw a 16-year-old yesterday. He came in with his mother. So he has a lot of problems with math at school, and he believes that he's doing okay in school, and he's doing his work, and he's working hard. So he's a junior in high school. He's having problems with math. Every day he gets up early, so he gets to school at 7 o'clock in the morning, so he can have math tutoring between 7 and 8 when school starts. And then he stays in school all day long, and then he's a jock, so he spends 3 hours a day practicing. Football season is just finished, and now basketball season starts next week, and he says it's 3 hours a day he spends that. And then in addition to that, he's got his homework. In addition to that, he has a math tutor coming in 2 or 3 times a week to work with him at home with the math that he's having trouble with. So he swears and verbally abuses his mother because his mother is always telling him that he's not putting enough time into his schoolwork, and he's spending too much time on his electronics. And then the father, who's a lawyer, is just kind of being standoffish to the whole thing and saying, it's wrong for you to swear at your mother, but I understand what's going on with you, and is not really taking a step. So here's a case of, I'm just thinking in terms of this, of a mother, and I could see how angry he was with his mother when I had the two of them in my office. But I was new, so he held it in. But here's a case, I believe, of a mother who means well, but just
Needs
does.
to back off.
Yeah, needs to back off.
It sounds like this kid, how much time can he be spending with his electronics? He has no time. It's like,
Yeah. And he must be a good kid. I mean, can you imagine getting to school at 7 o'clock every day
well,
to go for
does
math?
high school now start at 8? Because it used to start at 7.
It depends on the
Or
schools.
7:15.
This one
Oh, okay.
starts. He's going to a private school,
Oh, okay.
and they start at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Got his hands full.
So he's got his hands full, and it's a mother who, do not provoke your children to anger, and this is exactly what's going on in this case. It's she means well, and she wants to help him, and she brought him in for testing and wants to give him the help he needs, but she's pushing all the buttons, whether it's on purpose or.
But it goes back
or
to
not.
like the very, over here, where you teach them a trade
Mhm.
and you set them free, more or
Right.
less, or you pull in with one hand and push with the other.
Yeah.
You have to be able to.
Yeah, and I don't
separate a
believe he's
little bit.
getting that balance
Right.
right now. All right, honoring one's parents. So we're still dealing with parents and children. Whose turn is it?
Mine.
Okay.
In what does reverence for a father consist, and in what does honor for him consist?
Okay, so it says in the Torah twice. One time it says you shall honor your mother and father. The other says you shall reverence, or you shall fear your mother and father. So what's the difference between honor and reverence? Okay.
Reverence means that the son must neither stand nor sit in his father's place, not contradict his words, nor judge him harshly. Honor consists of providing parents with food and drink and clothing and covering them and aiding them to enter and leave the house.
Okay. So the first part deals with when you're still living in your parents' home. And so what do? Your father has a seat, and you don't.
Respect.
Yeah, respect.
Right.
You show respect. You don't sit in your father's seat, and you don't contradict him, and you don't judge him harshly. You just show respect. The other one is already when you got
Therefore.
when you have to care for your parents. So the other one, honor, which is what we read in the Ten Commandments, has to do with caring for your parents when they need help. And we're all in that situation now, right? Where we have to look out for our parents, cover it, and help them as needed. So that you don't feel like I'm only dealing with fathers here. Here's a story about a mother. Okay. Rabbi Tarfon's mother was walking on one Sabbath day, when her shoe tore and came off. So why is it important here that it's Shabbos?
She can't sew
Get
it
it
back,
fixed.
or she can't.
Right, she can't sew it back, she can't carry it, she can't wear it. I mean, she can't do anything with it. So here she is, she's in the middle of the street, and what are the streets usually made out of?
Like rocks
Right, stones and rocks, and
dirt.
they weren't paved. So Rabbi Tarfon placed his hands under her feet
Wow.
and walked with her in this way until she reached her own seat. So what did he do? Every time she took a step, he put his hand under so that
Wow.
he would take care of his mother, so she would be well taken care of. Once, when Rabbi Tarfon was ill and the sages came to visit him, she told them, "Pray for Rabbi Tarfon, for he serves me with undue respect." So pray for Rabbi Tarfon, because, pray for him anyway, but pray because he's a really good son, right? He's a really, really, really good son. You know the joke about the Jewish women sitting with the psychiatrist? I'm sorry, about the Jewish women sitting and talking.
On the park bench.
Pardon?
On the park bench,
On the
right?
park bench, yeah. So one woman says, "My son's really good to me. He does all these great things for me." And so what did he do? He bought me a Cadillac, and really, he just went out and he bought me a Cadillac. And the other one says, no, but yes, nothing. My son is really good. My son bought me this gorgeous apartment, and the apartment overlooks the park, and it's really, really nice. And there's a guy in the elevator to go up and down, and he really, really loves me. And the third woman says, "That's nothing. My son has a psychiatrist, and he pays $300 an hour to see the psychiatrist 3 times a week. And who do you think he talks about? Me."
You're in the wrong business if you're billing $300 an hour.
So,
That's funny.
anyway, so they asked, "What did he do for you?" And she told him of the incident. They replied, "Were he to do that 1,000 times over, he would not have bestowed even half of the honor that the Torah requires of a child to his parent." Saying,
Wasn't enough.
as impressive as you think that was,
Should be more.
yeah, you are obligated to show honor to your parents. So you show honor to your mother and you show honor to your father. All right, so now here comes part of that tension I was talking to you about before. So you're supposed to honor your mother, you're supposed to honor your father, but now we're going to put a third person in. We're going to put a teacher in. So if you are part of a rabbi's union and you're writing the book, and it's a choice between honoring your parent or honoring your teacher, who's the book going to say you should honor first? The teacher, right? Because that's who they're writing the book. This is being written by rabbis who are writing stuff in a way that they want to be given
There's the bias.
the honor. Right? There's clearly a bias here. Do you want to read, Fran?
Mishnah Bava Tzia 2:11. If one father's lost object and one's teacher's lost object require attention, his teacher takes precedence. Because his father brought him into this world, but his teacher, who instructed him in wisdom, brings him into the future world.
Okay. So if both people lost something and they have to go look for it, who do you look for first? You go for the teachers. Because all the father did was just provide the semen for bringing the kid into the world. But who's going to be responsible for him in the world to come? The
Teacher.
The teacher. So the teacher takes precedence.
However, if his father is a sage, his father's object takes precedence.
Ah, okay.
So if the father is also a teacher.
That's right. If the father is also a teacher, then the teacher comes first.
If both his father and his teacher were carrying burdens, he must first assist the teacher and then his father. If his father and his teacher are both in captivity, he must first redeem his teacher and then his father.
So if the father is on a ship and the ship is captured by pirates, or the father and teacher are both in a ship and the ship is captured by pirates, and the pirates show up and say, well, we've got your father and your teacher and you have to redeem them, and he only has enough money to redeem one of them, which one does he redeem?
Teacher.
He redeems the teacher. So the text is suggesting that the teacher is the more important one.
Not such good teachers. However, if his father is a sage, he must first redeem his father and then his teacher. So obviously, it makes most sense for all fathers to be teachers.
That's right. But it's definitely interesting here.
But it says, however, if the father is a sage.
Right. That's what I said.
Yeah, so the father's a teacher as well, then.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
it's okay.
It's the only way you can really take care of your father is if he's also your teacher.
Right.
I'd get a new teacher.
Okay. So here's a couple regarding relationships between husbands and wives. Okay. Barbara?
Babylonian Talmud, Baba Metzia, 59a. Of a man who loves his wife as himself, honors her more than himself, guides his sons and daughters in the right path, and arranges for them to be married after they reach puberty, Scripture says, and you shall know that your tent is in peace.
Okay. So what is a good husband? A good husband is somebody who loves his wife as he loves himself, but what more so, honors her more than himself, so he's expected to treat his wife really well, guides his son and daughter in the right path, and arranges for them to be married after they reach puberty. So if you've had kids who got married after 13, you're in trouble, because you should have been married at 13. But that's the idea, right?
No, it says after, so it doesn't say
Sometime.
there isn't any. It doesn't say just after. It's
After.
Okay, sometime after.
Right.
Okay, next one.
Well, it's interesting he says loves his wife. I wasn't expecting that out of anything we've read, really. The fact that he has to love her seems impressive.
Yeah. So the word love, by the way,
Is that the word that's used here? Is it?
it's like v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor. But love is not necessarily romantic. Love is a positive relationship. So you have to treat your wife the way you would expect to be treated, but has to treat her well. So there are love stories in the Torah and in the biblical literature. So there's a love story about Rabbi Akiva and his wife. but it's not necessarily the.
I don't think I know the one with Akiva. What's the one with Akiva short?
Oh, and really quickly. So Rabbi Akiva was 40 years old. He was a shepherd. He fell in love with, I think her name was Rachel, but don't hold me to it. She was the daughter of a rich merchant, and they wanted to get married. And the merchant Kalba Savua said, you're not going to marry an ignorant shepherd.
Oh, so that's why he studied.
Right, and then she said, "Oh, I'm going to marry him anyway." So they ran away, and then she worked for him to study, and then he studied for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, whatever it was, and became a famous rabbi. And then he came back to the town, and everybody was looking at him, and they said to her, "Wow, what a famous rabbi!" And then she said, if he went away and studied some more, I'd be willing to work for him some more. And she did, and then he worked some more, and then he became the most famous rabbi of his time, and all because of
Her.
I don't know what he did for her, but actually what he did was the term Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of gold. So in one of the stories it says that in appreciation of everything he did, he bought her a Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. He bought her a Jerusalem of gold. So it was probably some kind of jewelry that people said at that time, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, they knew what it was. We don't know exactly,
I
but
think that story was in, I want to say like the book, like The New Leaf.
Driven Leaf.
Yeah, I
Driven
think
Leaf.
that was where Driven Leaf, New Leaf, I couldn't remember the name of the movie details.
All right, next one. A man should always be careful.
I really just
Did
read.
you?
I can do it. I don't know who read next.
Did she just read?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Good. I'm glad you read.
that's fine. A man should always be careful not to wrong his wife, for since she cries easily, she is quickly hurt. A man must be careful about the respect with which he treats his wife, because blessings rest on his home only on account of her.
And this is what Rava said to the townspeople of Machaza: honor your wives so you may be enriched.
It's like when you, Aisha Kyle,
Mhm.
that same.
Yeah, but it's a little bit more than Aisha Chayil, because in Aisha Chayil she's a strong woman who takes care of everything. What this is saying is you have to look out for the emotions of your wife, and if your wife is
But the
a
blessings
cry, if
rest
your
on
wife
the
is a
house.
crier, you've got to look. You don't want to make her cry. So we're really seeing some elements of positive relationships and love, and there's an obligation on the part of the husband. I left out all of the stuff about procreation and sex and those kind of things, but that's a
But
whole
this
other.
is really a nice shift. I know I missed a week or two, but it's a nice shift from the way we looked at relationships,
Mhm.
either biblical
Right,
or, afterwards,
right. We're getting much closer to what our
reality.
reality and our understanding of relationships between husbands and wives should be.
Well, it's easier to pass on
Mhm.
this type of relationship advice to future generations.
Right.
Like this, than, spare the rod or,
Yes. Spoil the wife.
um,
All right, so here is a story. I'm sorry that didn't print quite the way that it should have. But here's the story. I'll read it to you. And what I want you to tell me is, what is the story telling us about the relative importance of staying home with your family or going out of town to study? Okay? So here's the story. Hananiah, the son of Hakinai, and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yochai, went to study Torah with Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak. They were there for 13 years. So there are two guys who went. So there was Hakinai, and then there was Shimon, son of Yochai. So they both went off to study. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yochai, used to send letters to his wife and used to know what was happening to his family. So what would he do? He would text and he would email and he would find out on a regular basis what was going on with his family. Hananiah, the son of Hakinai, did not send letters to his wife. I don't know his ground.
You missed a line.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did not send it to his wife. And then he was told. I left out a piece. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Then he was told that his son is grown. Come and find her a match. Okay, so you've been gone for 13 years, and your son is all grown up. Come and find him a match. Rabbi Akiva perceived with the Holy Spirit and said, anyone who has a grown daughter should go and find her a match. So Hananiah was told that his son is grown, has to go find a match, and what does he do? Nothing. Right? What does he do? So why has he finally decided he has to go? Because Rabbi Akiva, his teacher, said that you gotta go. He wished to enter his house, but found that it was turned in a different direction. What did he do? He went and sat by the well. He heard the voices of the water drawers saying, "Daughter of Hakinai, fill your pitcher and ascend." So she went, and he went after her until he came to his house. Just as his wife saw him, her soul left her. So what did he do?
The wife died?
The wife died. He went to the well, and then he heard somebody say, "Oh, daughter of Hakinai." So what did he figure? That must be my daughter who needs, and he couldn't find his house anymore because he didn't know what his house was anymore. She probably moved someplace else or whatever. And so he followed her, and just as he got there, his soul left her. Okay, so what is this text telling us about going away for 13 years?
You sever relationships.
You sever relationships, you break your wife's heart, your wife dies. And it also tells us that there are some rabbis who do a nice job about it. So if you remember, Yochai went to study, but at least he
corresponded.
Yeah, he corresponded.
He kept a relationship going.
Right, at least he did what he needed to do in order to keep things going. And then you see the last line there in brackets. There are those who say it returned. So at the end of the story, there's a comment that says that her soul returned. But it's in brackets because a lot of scholars say that was a later addition. That in order to soften the story, it was a later addition. So Bereshit Rabbah, which is a Palestinian story. So the rabbis of Israel wrote this story, seemed to suggest that you have to pay at least equal importance to your wife and your family as you do to your studies. Okay, so now turn to.
You see it modern day time also, just, what happens to a family when you have, one of the spouse, a spouse that travels a lot, that puts their job ahead of the family, puts their social life, their recreation, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the children that come out of those relationships, and they're troubled a lot of times. I mean, not always, but you look, and usually families that operate as a family, as a cohesive unit.
It's always better when you have a two-parent family. It's very difficult when you have a single-parent family. Okay, so now look at the next piece. It's Babylonian Talmud Tractate Ketubot 62b. You got it?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It's
So this.
just down at the bottom.
Yeah,
right?
just not.
Well, this is about marriage.
Pardon?
This is about marriage.
Yeah.
This,
Well, Ketubot is about marriage, but we're going to talk now about husband-wife relationships and Torah study. It's in Ketubot. This is a somewhat parallel section to what we just read from the Midrash. And we'll see it in just a second. Students of Torah may depart for Torah study without permission from their wives for 30 days. Laborers for 1 week. So, if your wife doesn't want you to go, but you want to go study Torah, what can you do?
you can go.
Right, you can go for 30 days. Just pick yourself. A laborer, on the other hand, can only go for a week. Okay?
Because they have more obligation to their job than to their spouse?
Because
That is important.
study is more important than laboring.
So if you were reading this in the Talmud, and you said earlier A and B, so would there be a compatible text for A that that you read at the same time as B?
Okay, so hold off for a second and we'll come back to it. Okay. And then, this is a famous one. This is the conjugal duty mentioned in the Torah. So this is how often you're supposed to have sex with your spouse. Okay, men at leisure every day. Okay? They have nothing else to do, so once a day. Laborers, twice a week, because they're busy and they may not come home every night, so twice a week. If you're a truck driver, once a week. Okay? If you're a long distance truck driver, once per 30 days.
If you're real long distance.
Okay. Sailors, once every 6 months. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. So, depending upon what your job
How
is,
far you
these
go.
are your responsibilities. All right. So now we got another rabbi. Rabbi Rechume frequently studied before Rava in Machleza. So this is a guy who would study out of town. He regularly came home every Yom Kippur Eve. So how often would he come home?
Once a
Once
year.
a year.
He would come home once a year. So the text is suggesting to us that his habit was that he would come home and meet his wife on Yom Kippur Eve. One day his studies captivated him. His wife was looking out for him saying, "He's coming now, he's coming now." He did not come. Okay? She was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And she became distressed and a tear fell from her eye. Rav Rechume was sitting on a roof. The roof collapsed under him and he died. Okay? What does this say about the importance of family?
Pay attention to your wife at least once a year.
That's right. How often do you have to pay attention to your wife?
Once a year.
But it's interesting though, this is, maybe I'm odd to say this, but he would come on Yom Kippur Eve.
When he couldn't have relations with his wife.
Good point. Okay. I didn't think about that. Right, he would come home on Yom Kippur
They
Eve.
didn't have many children.
And he couldn't have relations with her. So he got punished, but he got punished, I believe, not because he was away too long. He got punished because he didn't carry out his
commitment.
commitment.
Right.
So he had a regular commitment, and his wife was waiting away. And it was also Yom Kippur, and the most important day.
Right.
And you have to set your
It's interesting.
you have to set your priority. Okay, let's look at this one. This is the parallel story. This is the same Rabbi Hanania, son of Hakinai, but this is from the Babylonian Talmud. Okay? Rabbi Hanania, the son of Hakinai, was going to the house of Rabbi, the study house, at the end of the wedding of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Shimon said to him, "Wait for me until I can come with you." He did not wait. And he went and sat for 12 years in the house of the rabbi. So what did he do? For 12 years he studied in the house of the rabbi. And we don't have the story here about Shimon Bar Yochai writing his wife every day. We don't have that piece. Okay? By the time that he arrived, the streets in the town had changed, and he did not know the way home. He went and sat by the bank of the river. He heard that they were calling a girl. Daughter of Hakinai, come fill our pitcher and come let us go." He said to himself, "One can derive from this that the girl is mine." Really bright guy, right? I guess if they call her my daughter, she must be my daughter. He followed her. The wife was sitting and sifting flour. She lifted her eyes and saw him and was filled with desire. Her soul departed. He said before him, "Master of the universe, such is the reward of this poor woman." He prayed for her and she lived. So, what's the difference between the two stories?
One, he came back and tried to repair the relationship, and the other, he just neglected
Right.
the relationship.
In the first story, in the Jerusalem story, there seems to be a sense in there that you're supposed to pay some attention to your family. In this story, he went away for 12 years, never communicated with her. There's no sense at all that you're supposed to do this, because that whole line about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is missing. And then when he finally comes back, when the wife dies, he says, "Shouldn't she be rewarded? Why? Because she let me go for all these years." And then her soul was brought back. In the first story, her soul probably wasn't brought back because he wasn't behaving right. So there are scholars who suggest that there was a difference of opinion between the Palestinian rabbinic community and the Babylonian rabbinic community. The Babylonian rabbinic community felt it was okay to go off yeshiva and study was more important than family. The Palestinian community, on the other hand, felt it was far more important not far more important, but you had to pay attention to your families. So you had these two groups with different cultures, and in their stories we see some differences. All right, so this is what I want you to do. We're on the last page. Here, take one of these and cover up everything except for the line that we're working on. So only take a look at the line that says,
No.
Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa went and studied for 12 years in the academy. Okay?
Oh, wait a minute.
Like
What are we
this,
doing?
just
Cover
Cover it
up
up.
to cover up so we don't read ahead. Is
Oh,
what I'm saying.
okay, just like that?
Yeah, so you don't read ahead.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So knowing what you know, Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa went and studied for 12 years in the academy. What do you think is going to happen next?
He's gonna meet his wife.
Pardon?
He's gonna meet his wife after 12 years.
You mean he's going to go back home, or his wife's going to come look for him?
Oh,
What?
I think he's going to go back.
I think
home.
he's gonna go home too.
You think he's going to go home? You all agree he's going to go back home?
I think she's going to go look for him.
Okay, you think she's going to go look for him? Okay, let's look at
Because he hasn't been there.
All right, let's look at the next line. When he prepared to come home, he said, I won't do as the son of Hakinai did. He went and sat in the study house at his town and sent word to his home. Okay, so he knows the Hakinai story about the Hakinai came and went to the study house to find out his daughter. So what do you think he's going to do instead? So he's going to go home. So what's he going to do? What's going to happen next?
Oh, I was wrong the first time I think out loud.
Pardon?
So,
His family will come to find him.
Okay, so,
Well, this-
He's going to send word that I'm in the study house, and they're going to come and see him.
mm-hmm.
He's gonna give her notice that he's coming home, so he knows where the house is.
Okay, so when he prepared to come home, he said, "I'm not going to do as the son of Hakinai did." So I'm not going to.
because
I'm not going to come home and not tell anybody.
right, Haki and I
Right, Hakinai didn't
kind of
tell
surprised
anybody.
them.
Right, so he went to sat in the study house of his town and sent word to his home. So he
He
said,
said, I'm going to be in the
"I'm going to be
study
home. I'm
house."
going to come home soon, and I'm going to let you know. And I don't want to surprise you, because if he surprises you, what's going to happen?
She's gonna die.
She's going to die. So what do you think? So what do you think is going to happen next?
I read it.
Don't read. Don't read.
I didn't know.
That,
You think it'd be a happy story, a happy end?
yeah,
No, you don't think so.
I go for the happy ending.
Okay, so he's going to give an advance notice. He's saying I'm coming,
And they're
and
gonna
then
be-
Maybe they'll make like a party.
and they'll make a party. Okay, they'll make a party for him, and she won't die. Okay, let's look at the next line. Rabbi Oshaya, his son, came and sat before him. So he's sitting in the study house, and this guy, Rabbi Oshaya, comes and sits before him. Rabbi Oshaya is his
Son.
son. Do you think he knows that Rabbi Oshaya is his son?
No.
He might know the
I
name.
think that Rabbi
but probably doesn't know.
Oshaya knows that it's his father, but Oshaya doesn't. I think that Rabbi Oshaya knows that it's the
Right.
father, but the father doesn't know
Right,
it's his
because
son.
Oshaya can probably recognize
Right.
his father, but
On top of which, Rabbi Oshaya was given information. It was said that
he was going to be
Rabbi
there.
Chama Barbasi is sitting in the study house. So Rabbi Oshaya sits before him. So what do you think is going to happen next?
I think they're going to start to study. They're going to talk.
Okay, what do you think they're going to talk about?
Their Talmud, Torah.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to. I think, well, maybe they could. Maybe Rabbi Oshaya will ask him about his family,
Mm-hmm.
but he won't be able to tell him much about his family
Because
because he doesn't know because he's been gone.
Okay, so do you think that Rabbi Oshaya is going to tell him that he's his son?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not initially, I don't think.
Are they going to discuss the portion of the section on
They're gonna-
husbandly duties and that you should be coming home every so
So
often?
we can discuss about what a husband's supposed to do.
Well, that's
Yeah.
a subtle way of doing it, right?
Yeah,
Dad
okay.
should be coming home occasionally.
Dad, it would have been nice if you came home. Let's take a look. Okay, let's look at the next line. Rabbi Chama asked him about his
Studies.
studies. So this new guy comes in, and they start to talk. So what are you going to discuss? You're going to talk about what are you studying. Okay, so what's going to happen
So the
next?
father's asking the son.
And
what
the
he's
son's probably
studying.
saying, "Oh, I'm studying about how a husband should be a good husband."
Okay, these are the rules about husbands and families and how you're supposed to hang out with each other. All right, next line. He saw that his studies were
Sharp.
So they're sitting and
He's a
they're
good
talking and they're
student.
learning about studies. And he saw that Rabbi Oshaya was a really
Good student.
impressed
That's a
student.
brilliant father.
Pardon? A brilliant thought. So again, based upon what we see in the text so far, does he know that it's his son?
Not
Okay,
yet.
so there's no indication here. So it's like two colleagues studying. Son probably knows it's the father doesn't know. And there's two colleagues, and Rabbi Chama is very impressed with Rabbi Oshaya. Okay, what's going to happen next?
I think the Rabbi Hama is going to praise Oshaya.
His father.
It's going to praise Oshaya and say, what a great student you
What a
are.
good student, you're so smart. What kind of family do you have?
Ah,
Where do you come
okay.
from?
So you came from you're a good student. Who's your father? I used to live here at one point. Maybe you can tell me what family you come from. So maybe that's how they'll make the connection. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Let's go the opposite.
Do you think the opposite?
No, I'm just
It's
saying.
really funny because I feel like I'm on the hot seat. That's how I read to my kids every day. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen? And now I'm sitting here. I'm like, I don't know.
Okay. So, what's going to happen next in this story? All right, so let's look at the next line.
Oh,
He became distressed, thinking, if I had been here, I could have had a son like this one. So what's he doing now? He's feeling,
Guilty.
Bad.
Yeah.
Really guilty.
Yeah.
I let down my family.
yeah.
right. He's feeling very, very guilty. I let down my family. I could have had a really brilliant son, but I wasn't here. And I wasn't here to train him, and things weren't good. And okay, so my next question is, what's going to happen next? He still hasn't been home yet, right?
Right.
Do you think he's ready to go home?
Yeah, at this point, he probably, is getting curious about what his family is like.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't even say here that he has a son.
Right. Right.
He just knows that I would have liked to have something like this. So maybe he's ready to go home. Maybe he's ready to check things out. But we've got a little crack in his armor for the first time. We're seeing that he's a little
Repentant.
bit, he's a little bit repentant about what's going on. All right, next line. He entered his house. What's his wife going to say?
What the hell is he doing?
Call.
You don't call, you never come home. What's going
Hi,
on?
is that you?
I missed you. Dinner will be ready in 5 minutes. I mean, is she going to be the really good wife who just waited for 12 years for him to come home, or is she going to be the?
Hey, dinner is cold. Like 12 years cold.
So remember, okay, this is part of that Babylonian Talmud
Right.
section. Okay, so
She might be nice and say, I'm glad you're home and this is our son.
But it's funny because didn't you say that the Babylonian Talmud was a little bit colder?
the Babylonians were okay about their being away.
And
Right.
so if we're talking Babylonian Talmud here, then no, things aren't going to be so great.
Well, no, we're talking Babylonian Talmud. It's going to be okay because they're
Because he
happy
was
with
They
it.
understand, yeah.
See, and I'm thinking that if it is I think the happy outcome will come if it was from the other end of town, like thinking about family values.
So if we're correct, the Babylonian Talmud position would be, it's not so bad, you stayed away, things will be good. So let's find out.
But I don't like that.
And you should only read the Jerusalem.
And we're just hoping that this kid is
I'll
at
only
least
read the
13 years
Jerusalem.
old,
Read the
right?
Jerusalem Talmud.
Because if he's
Right.
not 13, it could be a whole
Okay.
other time.
He entered his house, and then what happened?
Oh,
His
He
son
entered.
entered after him.
Right.
So he came in the house. He still hasn't talked to his wife yet. His wife's not really, doesn't appear to be so important in this story. He comes home, and his son enters after him. So what's going to happen now?
he's going to say, "Why are you following me?"
So Rabbi Chama, who has been studying and learning all of these years and should be a really wise guy. First of all, he doesn't recognize his son. Then he comes home and his son comes in after him. So do you think he's going to know this is his son yet? Okay, let's see.
That it's his son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rabbi Chama rose before him because he thought that the son wanted to question him about his studies. So he rose before Rabbi Oshaya, thinking that Oshaya had some more questions for him after their previous
Right, he
discussion.
still didn't
So he-
realize it was his son.
Okay, you remember before that we said what the son's supposed to do? A son is supposed to stand for the
Stand for
Right.
the father.
Father,
not
what's
take
going on
his
here?
chair.
Now he's
Yeah.
standing for the son, thinking the son is a scholar, still not knowing that it's his father. Next line. His wife said to him. So what
Oh.
you get? What first time the wife appears? What does she say?
Let me introduce you. This is your son.
Or, oh, you found our son, something, you know.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm glad to know the two of you have met already. Everything is
Right,
fine.
right.
Hasn't seen her husband in 12 years. Father doesn't know her own son. And what is she going to be angry with him? Is she going to be upset with him? Is she going to be caustic with him? What's going to go on? Okay, let's look at the next
Have we
line.
see him if it's the Babylonian way.
Okay.
That's what it did.
Was there ever a father who rises in front
his,
of his?
Shame on you.
And
Shame
all
on you.
of a sudden it's like, oh, is that who you are?
Okay.
He said, well, it's a good thing that you got taught, you know, and he wasn't there to.
Yeah.
Something.
So, I did a pretty good job. I read this on, but
Right.
the very first thing she says to him is this snide comment. So, you know that she may not have been totally happy with what was going on, and has a little bit of a backbone. Okay, let's read the.
Right, and probably because the tradition was that the son would rise in front of the father, she realizes that he has no idea
Right.
who his own son is.
Okay,
Yeah.
so don't look at the last line yet. Okay, finish this. Finish. The moral of the story is. Finish that line.
Is it? I think that you should stay a little bit more in touch with your family.
Okay, the moral of the story is. Stay in touch with your family
Yeah.
so that you know who your kids are. Okay, anybody else? Any other possibility?
When the cat is away, we move forward.
Okay.
That's why I said
Life.
it's good that the
Life goes on.
Life
Life
goes
goes
on.
on, and you miss the boat.
Right,
Okay,
and
life goes
hopefully
on,
the
you
son
missed
is,
the boat.
is over 12 years old
Yeah, I just think that
and is
you know,
actually the son.
it rings so clear, about absentee parents. That you see it all the time, and I know I'm projecting, let's say, but the whole idea of, that the parents are working 50 hours a week and then they're going to the club and they go on vacations twice a year, but they have the nanny picking up and the nanny dropping off and the kid's a train wreck at school. But we have a lot of money and we take nice trips.
Okay.
Well-
And you can't hope for a family if you're not.
Okay, so do you all agree the moral of the story is he should have been a better father and he didn't do what he was supposed to do?
But he was studying,
Pardon?
wasn't he? Studying?
Yeah, he was studying.
Yeah,
At the
but he-
expense of his
I know that,
family,
but I'm just saying.
All right, so
It's almost like, a guy who abandons his family and then his child becomes an actor or some famous person, and then all of a sudden the father is like, oh, I'm your dad, coming back and wanting something.
all right, so let me show you the moral of the story.
Ooh.
Moral of the story is Rami Bar Chama applied to him this verse. It should be threefold, I'm sorry. The threefold cord is not readily broken. This applies to Rabbi Oshaya, son of Rabbi Chama. Meaning that because the father was a good scholar, his son was a good scholar. And they lived happily ever.
And his children will be.
I don't like that moral.
Okay,
So it's a little, but doesn't it make sense that it's from Kohelet,
Right. So what the text is suggesting to us again is forget all this stuff about husbands and wives being away from each other, forget all the stuff about not getting to know your kids. What's really most important is if you study. And if you study and you're a good scholar, life will be good. and things work out.
And it actually makes sense as to why you're supposed to redeem your teacher and not your father, because your teacher's who raised you, and obviously not necessarily your father in this day and age.
Okay, let me show you one more. This is another one from the Christian Bible, from the New Testament. This is from Mark. Mark is one of the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This is people are talking to Jesus is teaching his disciples, and suddenly his family shows up. Okay. It says, then his mother and his brothers came. Either full brothers or half brothers. It could have been brothers.
Jesus' mother and brothers?
Jesus' mother, yeah. Jesus' mother
didn't know
and brothers
mother
came. And standing outside, they sent to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, your mother and your brothers and your sisters are outside. There's different versions of this. One version has the sisters, another version doesn't have the sisters. But anyway, your family's outside. They've come to hear you, they come to talk to you, they haven't seen you in a while. You're here in Jerusalem, they come from Galilee, they're far away. What's going on? And he replied, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. So, what did he do with his birth mother and siblings in this story?
Pushed him aside.
Right.
Did he give him a hug and moved him in? And
No.
no. So it appears, at least, there's different interpretation of the story, but the surface interpretation seems to be that my real family is now the family who I learn with and study with and who follows my ways and who's part of my understanding of the faith. But my birth family is far away. A different interpretation of it is that what he's saying is, yes, I have my real family, but in addition to my real family, my friends are part of my family as well. But there's two versions of this, and neither version has him giving his mother a hug or saying, oh, this is the woman who birthed me, or any of that stuff.
It's more like he's saying, my brethren are my family and not my brothers.
That's good, right? My brethren and my families. But so there's some comparison in this between the other story that we just read. Anyway, I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, I hear this.
And next week we will move forward another 500 years and see how things change or how they remain the same.
Okay.
And you'll provide